and we need to think about what we do, which I believe about everything in the environment. And I think we've only become more cognizant of that since that resolution was passed. So people still use pesticides with abandon. I submitted online a photo collage of a number of little pesticide flags. If you ever see those little yellow flags, you know that someone has sprayed pesticides or applied pesticide granules to the grass or whatever you're walking on. Usually it's grass, and you want to kind of be careful because they're poison, and you and your children and your pets and anybody else who's wandering by is going to get residue of that stuff in their lungs, on their clothes, on their shoes. You'll get it in your car, you'll get it in your hair, you'll take it home, it'll land in your house. Anyway, on and on. They use them at the airport. I don't know if you know that. You did not know that. See, learn something new every day. So it's a big thing. They use a lot of pesticides at the airport because the FAA requires the airport to keep the sight lines clear. So I have suggested, and somebody else did before me, that they try goats for groundskeeping. And I don't know if you saw, but there was an article about it in the New Haven Register last week because people found it so amusing that they thought it was a good idea to mention it in the newspaper. And then some producer of Chaz and AJ in the Morning saw this article and asked if I would go on the radio. So last Wednesday morning at 8 a.m., I had about a 10-minute interview with Chaz and AJ, and you can imagine their take on goats at the airport, whatever. It was quite amusing. I recommend, anyway, that's that.
Yes, it was on the news.
Yes.
And also and you would know this, but New Haven has used goats.
Yes.
In the park.
Edgewood Park, yes, that was my suggestion too, years ago, yes. And you know, they did such a good job eating the invasive species, they sent them home early. And they're a huge visitor draw because they're lovely. Goats are just, you just have to be careful not to let them out where they can eat your flowers. Because if you have, I'm sure the choicest morsels are the things you planted that you want to keep growing.
We don't suggest that people go out and get goats, by the way, because we don't have an ordinance to support.
Right. Oh, right. No. We're not suggesting.
No. It's a joke.
Right. Yeah. They use pesticides on utility right-of-ways, railroads, electric lines, stuff like that. In fact, I had jury duty last spring, and I parked in a lot downtown on State Street next to the rail line. The smell of pesticides was powerful, and it was frightening how much of the stuff they sprayed without our even being able to have a sign that says, stay away from here, don't breathe the air. They use them on highways. I have many neighbors who use them. I saw an elderly lady with a huge bottle of Roundup one day in my neighborhood spraying the stuff all over the place, and I could smell it a half block away after she was done. And one year I took it, so I don't do this all the time, but I took it upon myself to make a list of all the pesticide flags I saw and write down the date and the address and the company and the product that was applied and the wind speed, because you're not supposed to do it in strong winds. Anyway, I'm sure I've shown this to you before, but you're welcome to have that.
And this is just one neighborhood.
That's right. And those are just the ones I happened to see. I did not go out every day in all of Westville looking for them. Those are just the ones, And it hasn't stopped. I just, I try and make a list of them, but it's gotten overwhelming that you can make a list, but trying to take the time to put it in a typed document, whatever, I gave up. Anyway, they use them at golf courses. I submitted Allen Memorial Golf Course and Yale Golf Course pesticide application reports. Misty had to get the Yale ones from Deep because Yale wouldn't cough them up, and Steve had to get the ones from Allen Memorial. I don't know how he got them, but I thank both of them for procuring those. I have been begging SDSU for their general pesticide application reports. They don't have a golf course, but they haven't given them to me. I've been asking for at least 6 years. I emailed them yesterday, no response. And we know they use them because I was at the opening of their lab school, the Barack Obama lab school there, and I smelled pesticides at the parking lot across the street from this elementary school where you are not allowed to use pesticides. So yeah, that's not good. They use them on athletic fields everywhere. I have many, many records of pesticide application reports that I have procured. I had to go to Deep and copy these records myself and pay to have them copied, and I had to have my state rep do a FOIA to get them. And then the next time I went, someone else did a FOIA. You can't just march in and copy the records, but they're supposed to be available online, but they're not. All the other state records, except the ones they don't want you to see, are available online. I saw somebody spraying them at the towers where the old people live, and you know, they live in an apartment building, they come out for some fresh air, sit on a bench, what do they smell? Pesticides. And the guy who was spraying them was not certified by the state to spray them, because I followed up to see if he had a license, and he did not. I saw a pesticide application flag outside one of the buildings of St. Rafe's Hospital one day. I took a photo of it, but you know, I saw a pesticide application sign at the state capitol one day when I was there. So all your tax money is paying for these pesticide applications. And this was at the beginning of the spring in April, when you don't know what's going to be, what the lawn needs. They didn't test anything. They just used pesticides. I think they spread granules, and then they used a leaf blower to blow them off the sidewalk, because it's illegal to have them on the sidewalk. Anyway, yes, I caught someone spraying pesticides at my next door neighbor's house one day, and that person wasn't licensed. But you can imagine following up with all these things is nearly impossible. I saw, one day I caught Yale, some neighbors actually, caught Yale spraying pesticides on my property and that of all my neighbors, because we live in properties abutting a Yale athletic field, and they were spraying pesticide on our property. They sprayed food plants that were growing in my backyard. They sprayed children's toys. People are just not paying any attention. It took me a year to get Deep to go and meet with Yale about this, and they were spraying synthetic glyphosate. It took me a long time to get them to tell me what they sprayed, and they wouldn't put it in writing. I got a phone call from Karen King at the Office of Community Relations. That's how I know what they sprayed. Anyway, these are some examples that I know about. There are many more, but I hope this gets you thinking about people using pesticides sort of indiscriminately. In fact, one day, early in April 2020, I saw a True Green truck, True Green, which used to be called Kenlawn, at a gas station in my neighborhood. It was the day a hurricane was predicted. So you can imagine how strong the wind was. And you know, you can call Deep every time you see one of these things, and I have done it and I've reported it, but it takes a lot of time. You have to document everything, you have to put it in emails, where, when, you know, it's daunting. Anyway, in March 2021, I know I brought a lot of props with me, sorry. In March 2021, the environment, yeah, that's me. Yeah, because I don't want you to be bored. The Environmental Advisory Council hosted Margaret Harvey, an epidemiologist from the State Health Department, who gave us this presentation on avoiding lawn and garden chemicals. And you can each have a copy if you'd like. And you can see that even fertilizer is considered to be kind of a pesticide. She made us a little chart. See, fertilizer is over here. It's kind of next to it. Anyway, it's on page 2. And so you can see that herbicides, fungicides, insecticides, rodenticides, disinfectants, and antimicrobials. The antimicrobials are the things in hand sanitizer that they now spray all over the supermarkets. Those are pesticides. I'm sure you've smelled them. Yes. Yeah, anyway. Yeah. So I don't mean to scare everybody, kind of, but anyway, you should know what you're getting into. I encourage you to look at Margaret's very well thought out presentation, because she had to check with the state before she released this to us. So, you know, the state health department did not want to give out any information that was, you know, not kosher, so to speak. And they want to be very conservative. So you can imagine there's nothing in here that's even remotely cutting edge, shall we say. And even without that, it's all very frightening. So the EPA, which is tasked with controlling pesticides, is not enforcing FIFRA, the pesticide law. And the law is full of loopholes. The EPA has been cited for not enforcing it, but nobody can make them. And Congress is considering some bills, including one introduced by Cory Booker called PACTPA, which is the Protect America's Children Against Toxic Pesticides Act. And there's the same language as in a bill in the House and a bill in the Senate. And it goes nowhere, but it's there in case anybody wants to deal with it. And the Environmental Advisory Council recently wrote to Congresswoman DeLauro and Senators Murphy and Blumenthal asking them to co-sponsor PACPA, and we got a response from Senator Blumenthal, who is obviously very concerned about pesticides, which is good. He wants glyphosate banned, and he wants other things banned, and we hope that will happen. Congresswoman DeLauro did introduce a keep glyphosate out of our foods ban. When I'm not sure if she's still on the Agriculture Committee, but when she was, she did several years ago, and they are trying. But, you know, I don't understand the machinations of Congress. I don't understand why they can't all agree on one bill. We won't get into that. Yeah. Well, you know what? When you're all Congress people, you'll fix it. So at the state level, we have some movement. In 2022, the Connecticut General Assembly passed a ban on chlorpyrifos use. Chlorpyrifos was a very specific thing that they like to use at golf courses. I think it kills some insect from apple orchards that they needed to keep it used for, but you don't need to use it on golf courses. Golf was invented in Scotland. Obviously, they didn't use pesticides in Scotland on their golf courses. And so the fact that we've adopted their sport and tried to, you know, make it work in our territory by using these artificial means is very worrying, very. In 2023, the Connecticut General Assembly considered a ban on neonics. That was last year. And New York City passed a ban on neonics. It's called the Birds and the Bees Act. And Governor Hochul signed it at the end of the year. This year, the Connecticut General Assembly, which did not manage to pass the ban on neonics, raised it again. And there's a hearing tomorrow of the Environment Committee of the Connecticut General Assembly, and we're all schlepping to Hartford to testify in favor of their using the language from last year's bill this year, because the language they use this year is worthless. So I think I emailed Misty all the copies of this legislation, so if you're interested, you can look at the links to it. So that is my little thing about pesticides for the moment. I have two suggestions. One is that we ban leaf blowing for 24 hours after pesticide application, because it takes 24 hours for the liquid variety to dry. And if you don't let it dry and you blow it all over, it's not killing what you want on your lawn, it's just spreading it everywhere, which is really absurd. And I know you know that, because we've discussed leaf blowers before, that the stuff spewed into the air by leaf blowers lasts a lot longer than the people using it. So the unsuspecting bystanders walking by later have no idea that they're walking into a mining field of pesticides and heavy metals and animal feces and all kinds of oil and grease and other stuff that nobody really should be breathing. My other suggestion, and this also came from the leaf blower discussions, is that we consider registering every groundskeeper and lawn treatment company that works in New Haven. I know the logistics of this are crazy, but that is, we can try. Some other municipalities have done that, smaller than ours, but still, it is worth a try. There are also, there are leaf blower bans now in several Connecticut municipalities and more all the time. Anyway, that's my talk on leaf blowers. I mean on pesticides. So these are all the advertisements that came in my mail last year for these lawn treatment companies offering me, you know, all kinds of poisons to help. And this one says address lawn threats now. It's from True Green. Well, my biggest lawn threat was from True Green. Anyway, unsuspecting people who get this stuff in the mail, and this doesn't even include the flea and tick stuff. This is just the lawn chemicals. They have no idea what this stuff is. They think, oh, it costs money, it must be worth it, and they buy it. And if you have a lawn care person who does not test your soil before treating it, the person is not qualified to do anything at your house. That's what I recommend. I also have 2 of these lovely pesticide kills. Are you risking a child, a pet for the perfect lawn? If anybody wants one, oops, sorry, you're welcome to them. These are the advertisements that have already come to my house this year. Started this week, beginning of March. That's why I wanted to have
keep a scrapbook up there.
You know what? Visual aids. Otherwise, you know, people are very influenced by advertising, especially elderly people. They're lonely, they're isolated, they're not educated about this stuff. So, you know, they're very susceptible to advertising. Okay, anybody have any questions so far?
So I guess just I thought they were supposed to be licensed to spread out pesticides. So if there's
yes,
you know, and here saying register every groundskeeper but aren't landscapers supposed to be already licensed?
So the people who are licensed by DEEP to spread pesticides have that particular license. But what happens is one person who owns a company will hire a number of people and supervise them, but each individual person does not have to be licensed.
So does each individual person, so they don't need to be licensed, and you're saying that anyone who is to apply these pesticides should be licensed regardless of whether the landscaping company they work for is or not? Is that,
well,
my understanding?
Not exactly. So what we are suggesting is perhaps getting a list of every company that does any kind of lawn care or groundskeeping in New Haven, whether or not they spread pesticides, just to keep track of them, just to know that they're not using more than 2 leaf blowers at once, just to know what they're doing. I mean, if they want to bring in goats and send their goats out to eat for an hour on your lawn, that's okay with me, but they might fertilize too. But the point is that New Haven does not know who is doing these things in our city. And some guy came and started spraying my next door neighbor's lawn one day, and he was not licensed. And he did not know what he was doing. He didn't know the chemical he was spraying. He didn't know the product name. He said, I'm doing a favor for Mr. Steve. And, you know, he barely spoke English. I could barely get the name of the company he worked for out of him. And it was really frightening because, you know, I didn't have any warning. I'm on a butters list. So the state is supposed to notify me 24 hours before anyone comes and sprays a pesticide in the properties that surround mine. And of course, I didn't get any notice because this guy wasn't licensed and he didn't know to notice. So the thing that happened is he ended up having to go to DEEP and have a meeting with the pesticide person, but it was already late. And you should know that DEEP gives these licenses to people who get trained to spray pesticides, but there's one person so they can get their education from, say, the Connecticut Ag Station. There's a scientist at the Ag Station whose entire body of work is on the uses of glyphosate, which is Roundup, which is the most toxic chemical. I send you a lot of links to articles about Roundup. You can look at them. It causes cancer, no doubt, and we're not sure why it's still allowed to be sold, but you know, Monsanto, which was bought by Bayer, is being sued out the wazoo. There are lawsuits, so many lawsuits. They put aside lots of money to pay off people for settlements, and the lawsuits just keep piling up. And so the fact that we have people who are doing the education who are really not on the side of fact is very worrisome. I mean, if we have a scientist at the Ag Station who's pretending that Roundup isn't bad, and I spoke to this guy one day because he had a whole display at the Ag Station open house in Hampton one summer, and I was horrified. And, you know, we need to get a handle on this, but the best way New Haven can do it is by trying to keep track of these people, because there's no one out enforcing this stuff.
And if these landscapers
Yes.
know not to spray pesticides near schools,
You mean if they can't spray them near schools, why don't they think they're poison anywhere else?
Well, no, but if they're spraying near school, they're obviously not up to date with all the, you know,
Yes.
licensures, and
Yes.
maybe they need some continuing education as well every couple of years or whatever.
Well, they do get that. They get that. But, you know, it was very interesting that at Southern Connecticut State University, where this Barack Obama lab school is, they were spraying pesticide all over near this elementary school.
Yeah, that's alarming.
Yes.
Colleagues, any questions regarding the pesticide section before we go into the next topic? Alder Smith?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Laura, for your presentation.
You're welcome.
A couple questions. One, just regarding DEEP's training. Are you aware of any responses there have been to update that training to make it more aligned with alternatives to pesticides?
Yes, over the years, they've gone from straight pesticides to what they call integrated pest management. And in fact, one time I asked for information about organic lawn maintenance from the Ag Station, and they sent me a whole thing about integrated pest management, which is supposed to be using less pesticides. Now, I can't remember whether, Mark Zaretsky, the author of this New Haven Register article, he said that when you bring goats in, sometimes they get picked off by coyotes. So if you don't want that, you bring in a llama. So he did some research, and some airports have a llama because they hiss and spit and they're mean. So, and some of them have sheep too. So he said that's integrated pest management. But you can quote him on that. That was his joke. I love it. But yeah, so they are people are realizing little by slowly, but it is very slow. It's not keeping up with the times. And what you should know about these pesticides is that you're not just exposed to them. So they are manufactured somewhere in a factory. It's chemicals. The people who work there are exposed. The people who live nearby are exposed. The people on the way when they transport them, as we've seen from recent railroad fires, are exposed. The people at the distribution places are exposed. When you walk by a shelf of Roundup in Home Depot or Lowe's, you can smell the stuff. I mean, and then, all along the route, you're exposed. So, yeah, so I'm not sure, it's not going fast enough, basically. And we, as a local citizenry, need to take matters into our own hands because nobody else is helping us.
Another question for you, just to the degree that you know, just a sort of a financial comparison between pesticides and the alternatives, is expense something that's standing in the way? Just curious your thoughts about the landscape of alternatives and their cost effectiveness relative to pesticides.
Yeah, so I hired an organic lawn care expert one year and had him come and do my lawn, and it wasn't cheap, but I don't, I've never paid True Green. I don't know how much they charge, perhaps less, but I think in the long run, what happens after you get someone to get your lawn healthy is you pay less in the future because you have a healthier lawn. And for instance, I decided that I would plant some mini clover so that, if my grass was a little bit thin because something was eating it, there would be some ground cover there and it would look green. And you can do that. And yes, it was $7 for this bag of tiny little seeds, but it went a long way. So I think, the pesticide, the grass seed you buy in the store, how when do you live in the house? Well, have you ever planted grass seed? So grass seed these days looks neon green or something, or blue. And the reason, and the stuff, the dye comes off in your hands. And do you know what that is? Pesticides, yes. And 5% of those pesticides stay on the seeds and the rest goes into the soil and water. So, what are we talking about with expense here? We're paying, we need to pay for health, not just a green lawn, a chemically green lawn.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Alder Smith. I do see Roundup everywhere, and the thing that really bothers me is that it's been banned in other countries, and we still use it, and it's been banned in other countries for obvious reasons, and I guess we're the lucky winners.
Yeah.
It's upsetting.
Yes, the precautionary principle doesn't apply here, right?
Yep.
However, I did hear from somebody that they banned Roundup in Canada on Prince Edward Island, they grow a lot of potatoes, and they created a black market for the stuff. So we really need to stop manufacturing these toxic chemicals. I mean, no matter what, they're harming us. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Alder?
Thank you. Thank you, Alder Festa. Thank you for the very informative presentation. I was interested to hear if you have any knowledge on previous education campaigns at all for New Haven residents, because even though, I've taken a bunch of environmental studies classes, read Silent Spring by Rachel Carson, a lot of this I wasn't aware of in terms of how it affects the locality and how people are perhaps not as informed as they should be on what is a pesticide, and the fact that a lot of things that you could buy at Home Depot or Lowe's that you would just apply to your lawn if you're having an ant problem or some insect problem in your garden, that it could contain these very harmful chemicals. So I'm wondering if that's something that the council has discussed or something that you've thought about a little bit in terms of if there's not like strict legislation banning the manufacturing, if there's something that consumers can do in terms of getting more educated and finding alternatives and not getting, I guess, plagued by, these things just being on the shelves?
Good question. So I don't think it's by accident that nobody knows about this. I'm pretty sure it is a dedicated advertising campaign, just like cigarettes, just like alcohol, to get you to do something toxic to yourself. And I have racked my brain to see how we can educate people, but you know how people are. They are loath to believe things are bad. They don't want to believe we're all ticking time bombs because we're subjecting ourselves to toxins. And so I don't know the answer to that, but you've taken the first step by serving on this committee on the Board of Alders and learning about it yourself. And you, as a young person, have a much longer time than I do to figure out what we should do about it. So thank you.
Thank you, Chair Festa.
Thank you, Alder Flores. Any other questions from committee members? Okay, seeing none, you may proceed.
Thank you. Okay, so the reason we're talking about artificial turf and pesticides in the same evening is that artificial turf requires pesticides for maintenance. I bet you didn't know that. Yeah, it does. So on November 20th of last year, I saw the Yale Field hockey field, which is out my kitchen window, being misted with something. And I see it being watered all the time. I sent a link to one of the photos I took. I sent a photo to you of the field being watered, which they do before every practice and game. But this was different. It wasn't the big fire hose mist watering things. It was a mist. And I wondered what they were doing. And within, I would say, an hour or two, my entire house, and I had the windows and doors shut. Nothing was open. I didn't even go out to take a photo of it because, I don't know, I didn't. But my whole house smelled like chlorine. It smelled like a swimming pool. And I can assure you, I do not use toxic chemicals at my house. I do not use bleach. I do not use anything like that. It might smell like salad dressing at my house because I use a lot of vinegar, but I don't use bleach, and the whole place smelled like bleach. And my subsequent request to Yale to tell me what they spread, what they misted, has received no answer to date, as you can imagine. I'm pretty sure that was disinfectant, or maybe disinfectant and antimicrobial, which, as you recall from this little brochure, are not okay. They're pesticides. Anyway, that's one problem with artificial turf. Artificial turf for an athletic field is composed of usually 4 layers of plastic. Sometimes they try to use things like cork infill, but cork freezes in New England, and so it doesn't usually work unless you have, I guess, heat under the layers. But so what they do is they put down one of those landscaping mats to stop the weeds from growing up, those black plastic fabric mats, and then they put a layer of gravel, and then they put a layer of styrofoam usually, I think, and then they put infill, and then they put the carpet needles on top, the plastic carpet. So, and to do this, they have to remove 18 inches of topsoil. 18 inches of topsoil is a lot. They have to dig it up. And that is really not good. And even residential artificial turf use requires at least 4 inches of topsoil remover to get the stuff level with the rest of the lawn. So the thing about soil is it's full of tiny plants and animals that filter toxins. And when you dig it up, you're taking away the Earth's ability to filter toxins out of the air. And then all these toxins get into the water. Now, nobody has ever told a child to go play on plastic. Installing artificial turf is like covering the earth with saran wrap. Most artificial turf is contaminated with at least 12 carcinogens. I sent a link to an environmental and human health brochure that explains a lot about artificial turf. And the manufacturing process for artificial turf involves PFAS, which means there's PFAS on the artificial turf. PFAS, which is the forever chemical that's contaminating our water that none of us really need to be involved with because it is getting into our bodies and never leaving. So the multi-layer plastic surface, which is like saran wrap, it's like you put saran wrap in the microwave when it's a hot day. The stuff off-gases toxic chemicals, and it can measure up to 50 degrees Fahrenheit hotter than nearby soil. So think about that. Kids playing, athletes trying to play a sport. I mean, and in hot weather, they have to water it. And anyway, we'll get to that. Maintenance of artificial turf requires grooming, which results in bits of plastic breaking off. It's like they have to even it out after people have been playing it, so they snip the tops of the needles that are sticking up off to make it even again. They filter down into the soil and the water. There's a filtering system under an athletic field artificial turf surface, and the little bits can get into the water. Maintenance also requires detergents and pesticides, as we discussed, and water. You have to water these fields to keep them clean because if you spray pesticides or detergents on them, you have to water them, or you have to dilute the detergents with water, or both. Now, I don't know if you know this, but the Environmental Advisory Council recently learned that water requires electricity for pumping, and wastewater requires electricity for treating it. So you're all paying 3 times for anybody who's watering artificial turf. You're paying for the water, you're paying for the electricity, for the waste, for the fresh water to be pumped, and you're paying for the electricity for the wastewater. Now, the Environmental Advisory Council had a long discussion. My daughter, who happens to have a math degree, had a discussion with the water company consultant about pricing. And basically, bigger entities pay less for water because they have whatever. They use more water, and somehow it doesn't seem to occur to the water company that every gallon of water should cost the same amount. If you have a bigger water pipe, you pay less, because you're a more regular customer and they can count on you and they're willing to give you a break. So just think about this. I mean, it's unfortunate. It takes 6,000, I think, gallons of water to water one artificial turf field, and field hockey fields are very special. They have a special kind of artificial turf, and to make the ball go fast, they water them before every practice and every game. I know this because there's one behind my house, and I take photos of it all the time when they're watering it, and I send you one, you can look at it. So New Haven has, New Haven has at least 11 artificial turf fields. I sent a photo of 6 of the Yale fields. I think SCSU has an artificial turf football field. Yale has 6. Hopkins School has 1. Wilbur Cross has a brand new one. Hill has one. I can't remember what else. There are others, and playgrounds also have artificial surfaces. It might not be the same plastic carpet needles, but it's still the same stuff. And I keep asking the powers that be at, say, the housing department in New Haven what they're making those playground surfaces out of, because we really don't want children exposed to plastic of any kind. We'd rather have them playing on wood chips or whatever, green stuff, something not toxic. So there are, at this very moment, artificial turf surfaces going in to the Yale golf course. They're putting artificial turf on the tee boxes. And the Hooker School is considering putting an artificial turf field on Whitney Avenue. Now, New Haven is full of wetlands, inland wetlands. That's why I took that training from DEEP. And inland wetlands, it is a very fragile ecosystem. And when you put plastic near it, it really can do detrimental things. And, you know, we have a lot of rivers here. We have a lot of things that go into Long Island Sound. And so what we're doing is really destroying the planet. It's really tragic, really, really tragic. I looked at a lot of artificial turf manuals, and I noticed that one suggested repair requiring polyurethane adhesives. Polyurethane is full of volatile organic compounds. Now, volatile organic compounds, Kathy Fay, who's on the Environmental Advisory Council, explained this to me. So just so you know, I'm here in person, but every single person on the Environmental Advisory Council is sitting with me in spirit, and they all gave me good information. So Kathy explained that volatile organic compounds are toxins made in very small quantities by plants to fend off predators. But when you accumulate lots and lots and lots of them, it's toxic to everybody and everything. And this is really not good. So we, like the guy who glued his feet to the stadium because he was a climate protester, Kathy pointed out, well, this guy's using glue full of volatile organic compounds, so, you know, he should have done something else and not poisoned everybody, whatever. Yeah, you see, I mean, you have to think about everything. Anyway, yeah. So, snow and ice have to be removed from artificial turf, otherwise it can freeze and break. And you don't have to do that to grass. Grass, you know, whatever. It gets a little wet or muddy, it's okay. And in hot weather, artificial turf needs to be watered before you use it because it's too hot. And if it's really, really hot, you're supposed to water it once a day at sunset. So I already explained to you about the water cost, yeah. And large crowds can damage artificial turf fields. So you lay down this expensive stuff and you want to make sure nobody walks on it. Interesting, huh? And artificial turf only lasts about 10 years, after which it has to be replaced. And they roll up the carpet segments and send them. Well, I sent a photo I took. You can see it because my finger's in it. You'll be able to see it. Misty has it. They roll up the pieces of carpet, and they put them in huge dumpsters, and they have to send them to landfills. So this is more plastic in landfills. And we don't have any landfills in Connecticut where you can dump this stuff. It's going to Ohio or Pennsylvania. So it's being transported out of state. And I'm convinced at some point, whatever state we send it to is going to sue us for having contaminated their water when the sealed landfill disintegrates and the plastic chemicals from the artificial turf leach into their water. Anyway, you can think about all of that. So my suggestions about artificial turf are that we test the materials that compose every single one of the artificial turf fields in New Haven for toxic chemicals and PFAS. You know, the state is in the middle of setting up a fund to test and remediate mitigate PFAS contamination from water. Remediate is from soil and mitigate is from water, I learned recently. So the state is going to have to set up a fund to test all the soil and water they think is contaminated and then pay to have it cleaned up. So that's your tax money at work. So I suggest that we test all the materials in the current and proposed artificial turf fields for these toxins so that New Haven will at least know what we're looking forward to so that we can plan. And the second thing I suggest, and we've had more than one discussion about this, but we had a large discussion at one Environmental Advisory Council meeting, because there are a lot of people in New Haven who believe that the City Plan Commission should not be making inland wetlands decisions, and that we should establish a separate inland wetlands commission, which most municipalities in Connecticut have. Some of them have it combined with their conservation commission, but for instance, the decision to let Yale put artificial turf on the tee boxes of their golf course, and the decision by the City Plan Commission to let Wilbur Cross install an artificial turf field, those were not, all the ramifications of artificial turf were not considered at those in those decisions. And though I served as intervener in both of those cases, which is what you can do if there's an environmental issue you want to have a say in, the City Plan Commission in New Haven does not deal with the CEPA law, which is the Connecticut Environmental Protection Act. I think that's what it is correctly. What's supposed to happen is if you file an intervener petition, the commission is supposed to decide whether to accept you as an intervener and then let you prepare testimony and get an expert witness to help you. Now, of course, if I go to a City Plan Commission and they say, oh yes, we'll accept you as an intervener, I cannot on the spot write the proper testimony or have an expert witness on some specific thing in my pocket ready to present, who's going to just wait through a whole City Plan Commission agenda. And it's really unfortunate we are not making correct decisions about this. And I think it would relieve the City Plan Commission of some of their items on their agenda and perhaps put them in the hands of experts, because we have plenty of soil and water scientists in New Haven. I do understand how hard it is to get people to serve on commissions. Believe me, I understand. This is my 9th year and I thought my time was up, and I have been informed I can't be replaced because there's no one waiting to serve. So I'm stuck till further notice. If any of you wants to help out, you're welcome. Anyway, so that is what I suggest for alleviating some of these things. And meanwhile, we need to, so as of June of this year, the state will be requiring everyone who serves on a municipal commission that deals with inland wetlands to have the same kind of training I did about inland wetlands. So we need to follow up and make sure people are doing it. But that's, yeah. I am happy to entertain your questions. I hope I'm not boring you to tears.
No, you're always a pleasure to have.
Thank you.
You don't bore us.
Thank you.
You inform us, that's what you do. Any questions on artificial turf from colleague Aldersmith?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just one question, just to paint us a picture of what could be possible. Have you seen any models of different institutions shifting from artificial turf back to grass or back to other landscapes and successfully?
I believe some teams in the NFL have done it. I know they have more money than God. I know we're not like that. It's very hard to uninstall artificial turf, because once you put it down, I explained that there are layers of plastic and gravel and stuff. So when you pick it up, it's very difficult. And then you have to find new topsoil. And when you want, it is okay if you remove topsoil, but to put down soil, you have to have it approved by DEEP, I think, because it has to they have to make sure that there's nothing in it that they don't want. So it's not an easy process. I don't personally know anyone who's uninstalled artificial turf, and I spoke to the state expert, in my opinion, about artificial turf, Nancy Alderman, who heads environmental and human health, and she said, we now have too many artificial turf fields in this country to start replacing them. She said Enfield is considering putting in 11 artificial turf soccer fields right now. So I don't know. You know what? Maybe you will figure out, you and your young colleagues will figure out a way we can undo the damage we are doing to ourselves. I hope so.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Alder Smith. Any further questions from colleagues? Okay.
All right.
Well, you are still up.
I know.
We appreciate you enlightening us, as you always do when you come before us in this committee with informing us of a lot of information.
Yes.
And, your suggestions, I obviously wrote them down, but thank you for bringing suggestions and not just the problem, because obviously we always want to learn on what are different ways that we can think about, making a difference. So I appreciate your suggestions as well. And the next portion of your presentation, we're interested in learning. Obviously, this is a new session with new alders that are on this committee, and I always love having you come in to let us know what you plan on working, what the commission is planning, how we can help you, and to always further the conversation.
Well, thank you, Chair Festa. Okay, so I last came before you for an update of the EAC work on February 2021. So that was a good while ago.
Time flies.
Doesn't it? Yes. So my motto for that year was use less, reuse more, dispose of waste in the most environment-friendly way possible. So it hasn't gone
At
so
the
well.
meeting, you came with your bag of goods.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes. I should have brought more stuff today. I had a bag of nips I collected I could have shared with you. But I sent a photo of the nips, which I submitted in testimony to the Connecticut General Assembly, which is considering a bill that would enable municipalities to ban nips, because there is no appetite at the state level for banning them statewide. So on my way here, I was stopped at a red light at El Grasso and Edgewood, and I just looked out my window. Just casually, there were 4 nips there. 4. We are just not doing a good job with disposing of things in environmentally friendly ways at all. It's very sad. The problem is getting worse and worse. I know you know that. I asked Kiana White last week if EPA has any please don't litter signs she can give us. I'm desperate for anything. It's really, I do litter pickups myself. I'm sure you all do too. I can't bear it. I even do people are littering inside stores. They just throw things everywhere. We must retrain everybody not to do this. I don't understand where we got the idea that everything was disposable and we can just throw things all over the place. Anyway, yeah. So that was from 2021 to now. My current motto is the planet is gasping for air and we are holding a plastic bag around it. So think about that. And my realization after after 8.5 years on the EAC is that the EAC is serving as the pollution police. Our mandate really is to gather facts and give advice and advocate for environmental issues, but people keep coming to us with their environmental problems because they don't know where to go. I'm not sure this isn't purposeful on the part of the state and federal government because they're overwhelmed by stuff and they don't want more people coming to them, but I think New Haven could do something. So this is what I think we could do. There is, about See Click Fix. So there's an environment category on See-Click-Fix. My suggestion, and I know this would take resources, it would take a person. My suggestion is to divide that category into different segments: light, odor, noise, air, water, whatever. There are a few more, but anyway, and to have people report things, because people don't know where to report anything. So we'll get back to that in a minute. But my idea is that we should create a clearinghouse where everybody can report. You can report litter. And the best thing to do is take a photo. Last week, I took a photo of, I think, 10 trucks idling on Waterfront Street while I was showing the environmental justice specialist from EPA around. We went to Waterfront Street to see the oil tank farms, and this is what we see: 10 trucks lined up idling. I mean, yeah, so I'm going to report it, but there is a 3-minute idling law, a statute in Connecticut. You're not allowed to idle for more than 3 minutes, but people do. There was a dog groomer, the dog father, mobile dog groomer, idling in front of my next door neighbor's house for more than an hour last week. I took a picture, but we don't have enough people to enforce all this stuff. But at least if we had a log, and if somebody at the city could say, okay, this is a state thing, we submit the odor complaint to the state, this is a federal thing, this is a city thing, and this is who at the city could do it, people might actually think they had somewhere to go. Because I was sitting at lunch with a couple of people a few weeks ago, and I said, the sewer company says they have no complaints about odors. And I said, really? So then I asked my friend who deals with New Haven youth soccer, and she said, oh, we smell odors all the time. And I said, but have you ever reported them? And she said, no, because I don't know where to report them. So the thing about odors is you're smelling them not where the place is that's producing the odor, you're smelling it somewhere else. So even if there were a sign on the gate of the Water Pollution Control Authority, which I don't think there is because I took Kiana White there, you wouldn't know how to do it unless you were privy to the protocol, which the state environmental justice advocate, Edith Castana, emailed me. She said, you can call this number or you can email this email address. You have to give the location, the time, your contact name, and what it is you smell. Who has time to do this? You're either helping kids play soccer or you're reporting stuff all the time. No wonder things aren't reported. And even if you report it, DEEP doesn't send anyone out to enforce it. And 6 people showed up at the once every 5-year Water Pollution Control Authority meeting about their long-term plan. I know because I was one of the 6. 6 people. They're supposed to give an update to the citizens of all the municipalities they serve once every 5 years, and nobody showed up. So, if we don't know how to deal with, and this is only one thing. Everything is like this, everything. Light pollution and noise. I mean, it goes on and on. Anyway, my idea is we have a clearinghouse for environmental issues, and we keep a list, and somebody monitors the list. And I don't want to be the person, but whatever. The Environmental Advisory Council would love a copy of the list if it is kept, so that we can monitor the issues and see what's going on. Anyway, it will be a process, but just like New Haven was a leader in See-Click-Fix, New Haven could be a leader in environmental issues reporting so that we can get things dealt with. If you see litter on the ground, a lot of litter. I used to call DPW when I saw stuff dumped from Chapel Street down into Edgewood Park. People would just dump things down the hill, and they would send somebody out to clean it up because, we can't, it creates a big problem, rodents and all kinds of stuff. And so it's unfortunate that people feel they can dump things anywhere, but we do have some measures to try and deal with them. So I'm gonna just run through a very quick list of issues we're tracking, which I sent you a copy of the agenda. It's posted on our website. We've been tracking the same issues for a long time because they never seem to go away, but some of them are being dealt with. So there's the English station remediation, there's the Wheeler Street transfer station, which I drove Kiana White by last week, and there was a flock of gulls there. Now this is supposed to be recycling, which is not supposed to be wet waste. So the fact that there are gulls there means there's food because they want food. So there's trash there, not just recycling. I know it's hard because we don't separate our recycling and trash, but we have this privately owned recycling facility on the water and they have trash there. It's a problem. We have a group who wants they want bird safe building update in the ordinance. So the city plan department will have to do that. You know, we're working on leaf blowers. We're working on city playgrounds to make sure that they don't get rid of any, to make sure they save all the trees at them, to make sure they're as toxic free as possible, to make sure we do beautification stuff and somehow this goes. Parks and playgrounds seem to be part of it. We do so many things. Tweed Airport, we're monitoring that. The Yale Golf Course, the Buckeye Company that owns now 4 facilities in New Haven. They're an oil company from Ohio. The NIPS issue, the mini liquor bottles. Sirens, we have a lot of people complaining about sirens. Noise is a really hard problem because decibels are very hard to measure. Public housing. Alder Furlow says, and he is correct, that we need a setback with every housing development for green space and sunlight because children need green space and sunlight, and he's worried that we are not taking these things into consideration. So he said I could use his name. I haven't done it before, but I'm doing it now, so you heard it here first. It was Alder Furlow's idea, not mine, but he really wants this to, he wants us to do that. We are monitoring a proposal for a waste facility on the New Haven, North Haven border. I'm sure you know it's called Eco Park, but it's a toxic waste facility and it will bring trash from all over the state into New Haven because they will use New Haven roads to truck them to this facility, and it will not be a good thing, and then they will burn the trash and we will all be smelling it because air pollution doesn't know from geographic borders. So we have Mary Mashinsky, who is a state rep from Wallingford, who had complaints about New Haven, and because she didn't know who to ask about them, she mentioned them to us. So she said she's upset about the garbage from the Long Wharf food trucks overflowing and blowing into the sound. So we have to deal with different kinds of, really people should be taking their waste with them, and we should make a habit of people knowing that you leave only footprints and take only photos, and is that right? Yes, and that they should be taking all their waste away and not depositing it in receptacles at Long Wharf. But if we can't do that, we have to figure out some way other than residential size recycling and trash bins to collect the waste. I took Kiana White there, and that's what we saw. Regular blue and brown bins like you would see at home. I understand those are the kind of trash collectors can pick up, but we need to do something else. I think there's a whole plan for Long Wharf, and perhaps waste receptacles are included. So Mary Mashinsky's other beef was access to the Little River from the Lowe's New Haven parking lot. She said in the agreement with Lowe's, there was a stipulation that we would have access, and somehow it's become overgrown and inaccessible. Anyway, we're monitoring that for her. The Hooker School artificial turf I told you about, the PTA is considering that. the tree ordinance. We are waiting for the Parks Department to update the tree ordinance. New Haven has a very backwards tree ordinance. In Hartford, if you want to get rid of a tree on private property or public property, you have to consult the tree supervisor. In New Haven, if it's on your property, you do what you want, which is why Yale University is chopping down 1,500 trees at their golf course. I think, this is the article about that. See all the, which is very sad because you cannot replace mature trees. It would take generations to do the same amount of carbon sequestration as those trees do. And New Haven, which has the highest asthma rate in Connecticut, we don't need that. And Connecticut already has high asthma rates. Anyway, we have some traffic issues, as you know. One of my big beefs is mobile digital billboards. You know, those little things. It's like, who needs those? They don't do anything but make, they're causing trouble. I don't know what kind of fuel they use, but whatever kind, whether it's batteries or something else, it's difficult. Testing for PFAS, I mentioned. We discussed a few other issues at our meeting yesterday. There was an injured hawk who was trying to get to a dead raccoon on Derby Avenue and was hit by a car. And, we need people to slow down because we need to be mindful of the pedestrians and the wildlife we live with when we're in cars. Let's see. I think I talked about all the rest of them. I sent some photos of some of these things you can look at. So I'm just going to go through a quick list of the major issues we have heard presentations on since I last met you. I told you about the avoiding lawn and garden chemicals. English station remediation, we had a discussion with DEEP about that. We heard about nuclear energy from a Yale physicist, Steve Lamoureux. We had a discussion about noise with Jamie Banks of Quiet Communities, and we're working on airplane noise and siren noise and all kinds of things. New York is doing some major things with this, and they're installing noise cameras. We need some noise cameras. I know it's very unpopular because people think it targets certain people, but we could really use noise cameras. We have discussed water sustainability and infrastructure impacts with the water company and the sewer company. We've discussed recycling with NUSRA, which is the New Haven Solid Waste and Recycling Authority, and with Cheryl Baldwin of DEEP. She's the New Haven resident who is the state recycling expert, and she made these posters, flyers, in Spanish and English. We've discussed oil tank farm permitting with DEEP and the Buckeye facilities in particular, because one of them, which they bought from Magellan, had 3 tanks that were built by Magellan and Magellan didn't tell DEEP about them, so they didn't have a license. They were operating them with no license. And the license has to be renewed for each of these things every 5 years. And so there's now a fight going on between DEEP and Buckeye because DEEP wants Buckeye to have an environmental justice plan, and Buckeye claims they don't need it. So we're at kind of a standstill. We had one public hearing with Buckeye about this. Let's see. We've discussed, let's see. We had an analysis of the English station remediation progress by a young man who came out of the woodwork and just decided he passed that Hulk every day, and he wanted to figure out what it was. So he looked at all the information he could find on the remediation and decided, of course, they've done nothing and spent millions of our dollars, basically. So yeah, that's unfortunate. In February, we had 100 people Zoom into our meeting, at which we had Tufts engineer Nilakshi Huda give us the results of her jet fuel emissions test at Tweed Airport. That was quite fascinating. So, so that's it. So I think I've shared with you most of my suggestions, and I'm done. Sorry to take so much of your time. Any questions?
No, I just want to thank you again. Is there any way you can leave those lists with us, just so we
Yes.
can,
Yes.
look at
Digest
it and, digest it, but also see what are some realistic goals that we can try to set. I know that, our Director Winter is here listening in on all of this, and we can also sit with him to see what is feasible, what the city can do, how, look at the logistics, because we all know it's more complicated than just us building legislation. We have to look at state laws. We have to look at so many other entities that entail true legislation on anything. So I'm glad that, Director Winter was here to listen to all of this. And of course, as a committee, we can try and put our heads together as well and see how we can assist you in some way.
Thank you.
With that, are there any questions from committee members? Alder Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just one small follow-up question about the tree ordinance. In Hartford, what is the nature of the tree ordinance? What's the criteria for the engagement between the tree liaison and public and private developers? We can also look this up, but
I think
hear more about that.
Steve looked it up for us, I think, but every time you want to touch a tree there, you have got to consult with the city. You don't get to do anything to a tree, which they value so highly, without asking and making sure somebody assesses the condition of the tree. So, yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Alder Smith. Schools
Yes,
and markets.
yes.
So my son is on the environmental
good.
club at Wilbur Cross and
Yes.
shows up with a bunch of his club members at my house with a couple of bags full of recyclables.
Are they redeemables?
Yes,
Oh, good.
yes. So I'll be spending my weekend, right?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
I've been to the Bible redemption place myself.
Well, the
Yeah.
money goes back to
I
them,
know.
so it's for.
Thank you for working for the Environment Club at Wilbur Cross, Chairman.
But, it's alarming that the schools, as well as even markets, the small markets, the.
Takeout places.
Yes.
They don't redeem the
No.
bottles.
So I think that's something that we need to really, I know it's been a topic for a long time.
Yes.
And I do know that Wilbur Cross has taken some initiative to try and recycle some, between food and
Yes.
other recyclable items.
Did the raise to 10 cents help at all for the redeemables, or did it make a difference?
I don't know. I don't buy bottled anything or canned anything, so
But at school, are the kids not throwing them out as much in the past month or two?
I
Have you
will
noticed?
find out. I
Okay,
will have to find out and see if the club has noticed any differences.
I mean, Iris Kaminsky, one of our Environmental Advisory Council members, wanted it raised to a quarter, the redeemable amount, and, it's a pipe dream, but that's what we should do.
Well, nips are redeemable, and we still find them all over the place.
Yes,
And that money is supposed to go for environmental.
yes. We're hiring a recycling educator with that money. Steve can tell you about that.
That, and I think that's where we need to start, is educating our children, because they bring the message home to their parents and families, and they can be the biggest voice, I
Yes,
believe anyway, to teach
yes,
their families how to recycle.
yes. Well, please thank your son for me. And you know what? Somebody in this environmental club should take video of the kids doing every part of the redemption. If he goes to the bottle redemption place with you, take a video of him doing it and, make a little instructional, here, this is what you do. And you end up with found money.
That's a very good idea. Thank you for that.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
Well, once again, thank you so much for being here, for enlightening us, and for your suggestions as well. And as I mentioned, we can sit down with Director Winter and have a conversation on some of these items and see what we can do.
Great. Thank you so much, everybody. I really appreciate your indulgence, and feel free to look at all the materials I sent to Misty.
We will, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your
Thank you.
time. All right, we will, actually, this was a workshop that was meant for our information mostly, and so at this point, we can move on to item number 2. So Krishna, if you'd like to come up. So item number 2 is electric future. So, well, Krishna gets organized. I'm just going to remind everyone that wishes to testify, there is a sign-up sheet. Wishes to testify on this item, there is a sign-up sheet on the table to my right, which is your left. Oh, it's Misty has it. But don't worry, if you're not signed up, I will always welcome any public testimony. And also, if you come up, you need to state your name and address for the record. So, Krishna, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm Krishna Davis. Address is 189 Elm Street, New Haven. Good evening, Chair Festa and members of the CSEP committee. My name is Krishna Davis, and I'm a member of the New Haven Climate Movement's Electric Future Committee. Thank you for holding this hearing this evening to provide the New Haven community with an update on the progress the city has made toward the commitments that this committee and the Board of Alders set out in the Community Electrification Resolution. This committee passed that resolution in April of 2021, almost 3 years ago, and we're now in March of 2024, steadily progressing toward the 2030 deadline of ending all greenhouse gas emissions in New Haven, a goal that the Board of Alders established in the Climate Emergency Resolution of 2019. We cannot meet our 2030 climate goals without persistent efforts at the city aligned with the commitments made in the Electrification Resolution in 2021. We recognize and appreciate all the efforts that the city has made to electrify its own buildings thus far and city vehicles, including school buses. These are very important steps to take. Outside of the city's portfolio of buildings and vehicles, there is still much work to do to make New Haven buildings and vehicles fossil fuel free. Last fall, the Electric Future Committee published a progress report outlining the pieces of the electrification resolution that still need to be addressed by the city, and we submitted the report to the committee for your review. Among the most important components still to be addressed are to incentivize developers of new buildings in New Haven to use electric-only sources of energy and report their carbon emissions to the city and to the public during and throughout the plan review process. A key finding from research that our committee has completed is that in the past 10 years, only 3 out of nearly 50 new construction projects in New Haven are completely electric. I urge you all and your colleagues in the broader Board of Alders, as well as your colleagues at the city, to implement development policies that prioritize the environment and public health of New Haven residents as 2030 and our ending greenhouse gas emissions goal draws closer. It's up to you to ensure that new development over the next 10 years looks very different from that of the last 10. Lastly, it's important to emphasize that electrification is an achievable policy goal. Peer cities throughout the US are taking steps that New Haven should also take to decrease greenhouse gas emissions and safeguard a healthy future for our communities. For example, Ithaca, New York, which shares New Haven's goal to decarbonize by 2030, is taking serious action to retrofit electric heat pumps into existing buildings and homes. And as of 2021, Ithaca has banned gas hookups in new construction, a policy step that New Haven could take. New Haven should follow Ithaca's lead and cities like Ithaca and make electrification a serious policy priority. There's no better time than now to take serious action. The future health and well-being of New Haven depends on the action that this committee and the city takes now and today. Please take electrification seriously and implement responsible policy now. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So I appreciate everything that you all do regarding, electrification, and, I think this committee, as well as the city, is actually trying to go in the right direction with it. But of course, with it comes also a lot of challenges. But with that, I'm going to actually invite Director Winter forward. So, and you're welcome to stay or have a seat, to enlighten us on where we stand, what the future looks at. I mean, we were very excited that recently, actually, we have a truck arriving any day if it hasn't arrived already, an electric refuse truck. And I know that Director Winter has applied for an additional grant to get us a second one. But again, those are challenges because we apply for grants, we have to wait for a response, we hope to be rewarded with that grant. Then you have to order the vehicle. It takes, but you know what? Director Winter, why don't you come up and tell us how long it takes from start to finish, and also where we are, where we're heading, and answer any questions that Krishna as well as committee members may have.
Sounds good. I know there was, I believe Derek in the audience also wanted to make a comment, testimony, so I'm not sure if you prefer to hear that now or after.
Actually, let's have Director Winter present, and then I can open it up for testimony.
Good evening. Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the City Services Environmental Policy Committee. My name is Winter. I am the City's Executive Director for Climate and Sustainability, and I reside at 459 Dixwell Avenue. And I have with me the other half of the office tonight, who's behind a lot of the great work that we do, but I don't think it's been before you all yet.
Good evening. My name is Max Kirstein. I live at 415 Orange Street.
Thanks. Thank you for your time and attention this evening, and want to thank the members of the public for advocating for this resolution, and for the committee and the whole Board of Alders for supporting its passage almost 3 years ago. I think the resolution provides a really valuable framework for city departments as we work to address the ambitious climate goals that the board has set. And I think it's more actionable in a sense, in that it's providing policy prescription beyond just setting carbon emissions reduction goal. So appreciate the support, and we do believe in this framework for the city, and think that if we look at the city's vehicle fleet, for example, that most vehicles, there are existing alternatives, electric, that we can take advantage of. For example, of course, there are cost challenges to that, and so you were mentioning the grants that we've been applying for. Those are opportunities to try to bring those costs down, and help the city bring those vehicles online more quickly. So yeah, look at some of the more specific requirements. The Chief Administrative Officer's Office did complete a vehicle electrification study, which included a cost-benefit analysis, or cost comparison really, for electric refuse vehicle, and that did spur the purchase of the refuse vehicle that Chair Festa mentioned. We did apply in December for a second Diesel Emissions Reduction Act grant for a second electric refuse vehicle. There's probably another dozen refuse vehicles in the city fleet. So we have a lot more work to do there. But I think once we have one on the road and people see how much diesel we're saving, how much we're saving cost-wise, but also the reduction in air pollution and how much quieter it is, I think that'll help hopefully accelerate that process and help us look at other vehicles that are similarly polluting, like our street sweepers. I think is the next big opportunity for us. We have also begun the electrification of our light-duty fleet. So last year we purchased 7 Chevy Bolts, which we added to a few Nissan Leafs that the city has. And Max and I have worked with the Chief Administrative Officer's team to update the fleet analysis and look at the next round of vehicles that we can electrify. And I think there's really strong arguments for us to electrify, most of our light duty fleet in the very near future. And that'll be something that, again, will save us money, even upfront with the federal incentive payments that the city is now eligible to receive. And then on an ongoing basis, as we have vehicles with fewer moving parts and lower fuel requirements, less maintenance. Beyond that, I think we can look at things that we're just going to see a big proliferation, in the next year or so of small and mid-size electric SUVs, electric trucks and vans. I think that's kind of the next class of vehicles that we can look at. We've also been working with our city engineer and his team on electric vehicle charging. So once we have these vehicles, be able to charge them, and that we have different types of chargers that can help accommodate use patterns, and also if you have a vehicle that needs to quickly charge, that you have the infrastructure to do faster direct current charging. So yeah, we're making some progress there. Appreciate the recognition earlier about that. And I think we have room to accelerate that progress. I think the 2030 goal will still be challenging, but if we're able to marshal additional resources from the state and federal government, and we're able to bring in new electric vehicles and successfully deploy them in some of the other use cases I described, then I think we'll be able to go a long way towards that goal. The city engineer gave me an update on some of the electrification progress with our buildings. So the board acted very quickly a few years ago to purchase the former DOT building at 424 Chapel Street. I think that's going to be a tremendous asset for the city as we move departments like the health department that we're paying rent to a facility that we own, right? That's got to feel good. But it's also got to feel good that the building is almost entirely heated by heat pumps. There's only one part of the building where there are these giant garage doors where it really wouldn't have been feasible with the heat pump technology we currently have to move off of gas. But the vast majority of that building will be heated with heat pumps, and we'll also have room there for electric vehicle charging. 200 Wintergreen, probably not, I've never even set foot in there, but it is a fairly large city building, former Army barracks, and part of the police footprint. The boiler in that building died recently, and that building has, I don't know if the work is entirely done. It's in the process of being converted entirely to heat pumps. We're also retrofitting other buildings, I would say of a moderate size. So the Atwater Senior Center is one notable example that had an older heating system, and we were able to move that to heat pumps. If you visit the Shack Community Center, you'll see new heat pumps installed there. Keep saying heat pumps, heat pumps, heat pumps, heat pumps, but they are great. 188 Bassett, another recent property acquisition for the city, which will house adult ed, will be heated entirely with heat pumps. And then the last new, I think, like sort of new space requirement for the city are the youth centers or recreation centers that the Board of Alders has supported with American Rescue Plan dollars. Those will all be fully electric. So yeah, I think we're making considerable progress there. And we do still have funds allocated, ARPA funds for building electrification. So we've been able to utilize those for 200 Wintergreen. And I hope that we'll be able to make some more significant progress with the with the funding that remains there. The Board of Education was, the mayor was required to work with the Board of Education on transportation electrification, and those efforts are underway. We recently applied for the third round of EPA Clean School Bus funding. I believe we applied for electrification of 25 buses. So that, we have a pretty large fleet, but that would be a significant piece of the fleet. The Board of Ed recently issued a new transportation RFP. First Student was the only respondent, but as part of that RFP, they were required to present a plan for how they would electrify the vehicle fleet within 6 months of beginning their new contract. And that agreement should be headed, I think, to the full Board of Education very soon. So, I think I would expect that later this year we would have a plan from First Student should the agreement be approved, and for covering the infrastructure costs, the vehicle costs, and what potential opportunities there are to fund that transition. They are considerably more expensive than diesel buses, so I think finding grant opportunities will be important. Or looking at other ways that you can spread out the costs over the life of the vehicle. So that, there is some progress there as well. And of course, it's incredibly valuable work in that these are buses that are, a lot of them are currently diesel, and it's going right into our kids' lungs. So everybody understands the urgency there. Moving on to city plan, so the requirements in the resolution for city plan to work on zoning language that would incentivize or require developments to move to all electric construction. There has been some work there. I think we have more work to do. The this of course applies to new buildings, and we have made, when I say we made some progress, mainly thinking of the commercial corridors district, where there are some incentives for LEED construction and mass timber construction, and then more recently the Long Wharf zoning that the Board of Alders approved, which has a whole table of sustainability bonuses that developers can receive for doing various things that relate to sustainability, whether that's like having a passive house, so like the most energy efficient building envelope, whether they're generating renewable energy on site, so if they have solar arrays, and then the largest 2 points totals are, you can get 5 points if it's all electric. You can get another 5 points if it's mass timber. So if you have something that has some solar and it's mass timber and is all electric, you can get 12 points. And 8 and 12 points are important thresholds for the Long Wharf because you get a density bonus. So you can go from having a maximum of 100 units per acre to, if you have 8 points, 185 units per acre. If you have 12 points, 265 units per acre. So hopefully we see all electric developments taking advantage of these zoning bonuses to create more sustainable, denser developments in the Long Wharf. It hasn't happened yet, but there is a framework for that. Other communities that I think have taken notable action on utilizing zoning to spur sustainability would be Norwalk and Stamford. Norwalk requires buildings that have a footprint of more than 5,000 square feet or a floor area of more than 20,000 square feet to either meet one of the various green construction standards, so LEED, Enterprise Green Communities, National Green Building Standard, Silver, LEED Silver, National Green Building Standard, Silver, along with meeting a stormwater retention requirement, or demonstrating that they are either Passive House LEED Zero, which is much more intense than LEED Silver, or LEED Gold, or LEED Platinum, or Zero Energy Ready, or Living Buildings. So those are some, like, kind of a menu of the most intense energy efficiency requirements. And typically, if you're reaching one of those standards, you're doing it with an all-electric mechanical system for heating and hot water, and the other the appliances in those units. So I think that that could be a model. It's not explicitly all electric, but I think it could get us doing something similar. Could get us a lot of the way there. So that's, I think that's an interesting avenue for the city to explore. And I think we'd want to work with City Plan, and we have been talking to City Plan about working together on this, and also working with Corporation Council to ensure that whatever we pass is within the city's zoning powers. I think it'd be great if we could wave a magic wand and, if we had control over our building code, which the state controls, we could do it that way, and that would be a very direct way to do it. But the state does control that, and on the building code side of things, there are litigated challenges from the gas industry. I'd have to look more into what the state of play is legally related to something done through zoning. I think we have more latitude there, but that's something we just need to be mindful of, is that we want to make sure whatever we do is on a strong legal foundation. So I think what Norwalk's done is really interesting, and I know from talking with their staff that they have had attorneys vetted, and it's not like they just passed this law out of nowhere. So I think there's an opportunity for us to work with City Plan, continue to work with City Plan on that type of a standard for new development. And for existing developments, Max and I have been working on getting the word out about the I Heart My Home program, which is for 1 to 4 family residences to help them get off of fossil fuels, be more energy efficient. And we've knocked on over 3,000 doors now. Max has been leading that effort, and over 100 residents have had initial phone calls with NHS, and then some decent amount of those folks have also had or are scheduling energy assessments. It can take time because they're piecing together different funding streams to help move people through the energy efficiency electrification process, to get them, if they've got an old oil system or an old gas system, to move them over to heat pumps. It doesn't just happen overnight, but it's something people will work on, and they'll work with them as long as they can. The last couple things on here, we have been working with the building department and have some language that we'd like to put on the building department website, and I think they're agreeable to, for just advertising the programs that do exist for new construction or major retrofits through Energize CT to help incentivize these developments. I think putting that on their page, somebody who's pulling a permit for a project may think maybe I want to explore this before we submit our plans. So we're working on that, and hopefully we'll have that up soon. And the Economic Development Department, planning on local jobs and boosting local businesses. We have partnered with the Small Business Office to get the word out about the Small Business Energy Advantage Program, which is like largely focused on lighting retrofits and heating control. So, less expensive and less focused on electrification, but more focused on energy efficiency. And that outreach has been fairly successful. We focused on Grand Avenue, Kimberly Square, Dixwell Avenue, and Chapel Street. I think there have been eight businesses that have had improvements installed or in progress, and then about another 30 that are either have signed an agreement to have efficiency improvements or are getting a proposal scoped out for them.
Is that it?
I mean, there's a lot more we need to do, but I think one good thing about the resolution was that, there are these specific measures that we need to be working on, doing our best to push forward.
So at one point we were discussing, well, I thought we approved actually, solar panels in the parking lots of the schools, and some of our schools do have solar panels as well. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure.
Where we stand?
Yeah. So our schools, I think all of our schools use natural gas for heating, but there are, I think, 21 rooftop solar arrays which provide power to help offset the electrical consumption for HVAC systems, lighting, the other electrical loads in the schools. And we are close to submitting. We did approve agreements for the Q House for 2 parking lot canopies and the landfill solar arrays. Q House, for whatever reason, didn't make it through the initial approval process, so we resubmitted that at the beginning of March last week. Time flies. And the rooftop arrays, you have to for all these larger systems, even for your rooftop system at your home, you've got to apply to connect or interconnect back into the grid. So we're almost ready to apply for that. And the landfill solar project, you might recall, we had to come to an agreement with the Waste Authority in order to access the landfill. We were able to do that, and now we're working with the Solid Waste Authority and DPW to get surveyors on site. So they've come and visited, and we're moving that forward as well. It should go, I think, to city plan to get their zoning approval, and then they could start construction this summer.
Now, weren't there some schools that were also going to have solar panels applied to their parking lots under the canopy?
Oh yes, sorry. So the two schools were Hill Central and LW Beecher schools. So they'll have.
I thought Cross was on there too.
Cross, we would like to do Cross, like to do Career, we'd like to do Hill House, but the state's rules currently don't allow you to add solar to another property that has solar, and those schools have solar. So it's a real, please contact your legislators.
So I'm going to guess that those are some of the challenges that we face, or these types of.
So there's lots of different challenges, like with the trash truck, it was a supply chain issue, partially COVID, and then partially these are new vehicles. Not many communities have electric trash trucks. So it took about 2 years to go from ordering the vehicle to delivering the vehicle, and now they're like doing the final round of troubleshooting and quality assurance testing on the vehicle. And then with the solar projects, we put up an RFP around this time last year, and so there's a long cycle from selecting a vendor, or identifying sites, selecting a vendor, signing contracts, and then the work actually begins. So I was overjoyed the other day when the surveyors actually went to the landfill. It was like about a year later. So that's difficult, and anything we can do to speed those processes up is really, it would be very valuable.
I mean, there's multi-layers to this too, is in regard to funding. It's not just a municipal problem, it's a state, but what is the federal government doing nationwide to help with some of these goals and some, because they made a promise too, so.
Yeah, I mean, I think the federal government's doing more now than it ever has before. So, you know, if we look at the Chevy Bolts we purchased last year, each Bolt will receive eventually, hopefully later this year, a $7,500 direct payment to the city. So the city will submit our receipts essentially and tell the federal government, here's where these cars live. You know, they live at DPW or the health department, and then the federal government, the IRS, you know, if all goes according to plan, will write us a check for $7,500 per vehicle. For heavy duty vehicles, it's 30% of the vehicle cost up to a cap of $40,000. So that's something we should be able to take advantage of for the refuse vehicle and for future heavy duty vehicle purchases. And all of that, you know, all of that is codified in the Inflation Reduction Act. So yeah, I think those are really valuable. And previously, before the Inflation Reduction Act, municipalities couldn't receive those payments. You could lease a vehicle, and then whoever you lease it from could claim a tax credit. But this direct pay provision really helps us ramp up these kinds of activities. So if you buy a Chevy Bolt for, let's say, $27,500, at the end of the day, once you get that money back, the city's only spent $20,000, which is, you know, that's a pretty good, great deal. With the solar incentives were on a declining path where they were going to kind of peter out over time, and the federal government locked those in at the rate they were at, which was 30%. And then there are some bonus provisions you can get for solar and for geothermal. So we don't, it's sort of, the solar pieces, you've got to apply for them, and only a certain number of projects will get the additional solar benefit. We did apply for it, so we'll see if we receive that. So for the landfill project, that, you know, if those tax credits had expired, who knows if the project even would have been viable. Instead, the city's, you know, if everything gets built, the city would receive $72,000 a year, in large part because of the tax credit. And then if we get this additional tax credit, then it's $89,000 a year.
How about infrastructure? I mean, where does the federal government stand with infrastructure regarding, you know, I mean, you see gas stations, right, off exits and on the highway. Where do we stand with electrification, electrical pump, you know, the
Sure.
Tesla style?
Yeah, the charging stations.
Thank you.
Yeah. So we had brought this charging station proposal to you all. Must have been, we submitted it
Like a full year ago. June.
We didn't receive funding for it, but we worked with the state on their application. I think they had 6 or 8 cities that were involved in their application. They got funded. So the 2 locations were, one was Wilbur Cross, kind of at the end of that parking lot, and then the other location is like in the Worcester Square area. So those would each have 12 high-speed charging ports. So, you know, you could, if you had a new vehicle, the new vehicles have batteries that can charge much faster. So you might stay there for 20 minutes and be on your way. So you could go to, you know, get a pizza or something in Worcester Square, or go for a walk with your dog in East Rock Park, and then somebody else could come and use that charging station. But again, that's federal money we've been selected for. Then you've got to receive the award, contract, go through some meetings with the public to make sure concerns are addressed. So there's a lot more before that.
The bureaucracy behind.
Yeah. There's also a lot of federal funding. I'm not as familiar with the allocations for like the larger electric grid, including additional transmission to help link New England to Canada, where they have these enormous rivers and huge hydropower that can help us import more clean energy if we had more arteries to bring that energy in. So there's also a lot that is being done with strengthening the larger electric grid. Not nearly enough to get us like where we need to be, but more than we've been doing before. Yeah, and then the state also has a series of incentives for solar. So we were part of this reverse auction for the landfill project where people bid in to develop solar projects at as low a cost as possible, but they can receive a subsidy from the state for that. And then on electric vehicles, the state has this cheaper program where they'll give you an upfront rebate on your EV as a resident. So as a New Haven resident, I think we've mentioned this before, you can claim the $7,500 federal incentive, and now that's an upfront incentive. So instead of claiming it on your tax credits, your dealer can just do it. And then there's a state incentive, which is for New Haven residents is $4,250. So it ends up being almost $12,000 that you can get upfront off the cost of a new vehicle. So that's substantial, and it hasn't happened yet, but the state board that oversees the program is planning to allow cities to use the same program to purchase, I think, up to 20 vehicles. So that would be great if we could take that same savings that residents can take.
When you talk about these grants, though, we're not the only ones applying. There's other municipalities applying, so there's a lot of competition for them as well. Do you see growth in even the federal government expanding and allowing more possibilities for people to apply, municipalities to apply for this?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think we're in this sort of like limited window where there's been this big bump in funding from the infrastructure bill. So we were on a call with the Port Authority last week about port electrification. We actually have one of the world's largest electric cranes in our port. It's pretty amazing. It was shipped over from Germany, and they had to get an even larger crane on like a boat to install it. So if you go by the port, take a look. It's like the big crane. So anyway, that's their additional funding for clean ports that was just announced recently. There are some large EPA grants around reducing climate pollution that will be happening this year. So we're looking into whether we can apply for those. Those are super competitive. Will be challenging to get, but I think it's a good opportunity for us to like pencil out some ideas. Even if we don't get the grants, it'll help us, with the next funding opportunity, whether that's at the state or federal level.
Thank you for your presentation and all of this information. It's a lot of information.
Yeah, there's a lot to
I'm going to open up to my colleagues for questioning. Alder Singh.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Director Steve, for presenting tonight with information. I would like to circle back on the residential piece of the electrification. Are there any incentive if anyone wants to move from a gas stove to electric stove? Are there any rebates in that level?
Yeah, so I had brought before you this federal incentive program. We're still waiting on that. That would be for electric appliances, so space heating. So looking at replacing furnaces or boilers with heat pumps, heat pump water heaters, going from gas to electric stoves, as well as wiring and panel upgrades that can help enable electrification. We don't know exactly when, but that process serves a similar thing. The federal government allotted money to the states. States have to submit plans to the federal government, then the federal government will actually award the funds. Connecticut, I don't think, has yet submitted their proposal, but a bunch of states now have, and there's a deadline. So I think like hopefully later this year, those funds start to flow. There are also state rebates that are available now. So for a water heater, if you wanted to get a heat pump water heater, which like is even compared to using a gas water heater, will save people money just operating it. There's a $750 rebate that you can get at Lowe's or Home Depot or through your plumber. And then there are also heat pump rebates that are based on the size of the heat pump. So those are for every 10,000 BTUs of heating, there's $2,750. So it helps offset the increased cost of the heat pumps.
Thank you. And just a sidebar, Ford is partnering with Tesla now. If you buy a Ford vehicle, it comes in an adapter and you could use the Tesla charging port.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, and I guess one more thing on the home incentives. If you're a home owner, so if you're doing it in your own home, you can claim 30% of the cost of a lot of these improvements as energy improvements on your taxes. Yeah, so with vehicle charging, the Tesla charging port, all of the other automakers have now said that they're going to move to that, in the next year or 2 years. So yeah, I think there will be a lot more adapters. And then again, the necessity of federal funding, the federal government said if you want to receive federal funding for charging stations, you have to let other automakers use your charging station. So Tesla said, okay. And then, there have been reliability issues with other charging stations. So Electrify America was a charging station network that VW had to set up after the emissions testing scandal. And there have been, reliability issues with that, whereas Tesla has like really excellent reliability standards. So I think that that'll help people with adoption now that, hey, I can buy a Ford now, or next year a GM, or next year a Hyundai, and still be able to plug in there.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Alder Singh. Alder Smith?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Director Winter and Max, for your presentation, and Krishna for your testimony. I asked this the last time you all came to present the committee, but just for tracking purposes, the percentage of electric vehicles that we currently have of our fleet is it still around 1 to 2%?
Yeah, it's about 2%.
About 2%?
Yeah.
Okay. And then thank you so much for the just breakdown of the number of buildings that are going to be electric. What's sort of, again, for tracking purposes, the percentage of our city buildings that are currently electric?
I'd have to check with Giovanni about that. I think it's more on like a square footage basis.
Okay.
Yeah, how many square feet have we electrified? Because we have like tiny little buildings, everything from like the rec centers and the police substations all the way up to the building we're in now, or 200 Orange Street, which are, or 424 Chapel, I think is another fairly big one. Yeah, so I think we're making progress in moving up to larger buildings, but we haven't, like 424 would be the largest, I think, that we have. That's, again, it's not all electric, but it's almost all electric. So we've really got to look at 200 Orange Street and City Hall. If those would be big electrification projects.
That's really helpful. Yeah, I think the spirit of the question is just trying to get a sense of where are we at, where are we at in sort of the process and how much further do we need to go. So that's the square footage point is really helpful. Just a couple other questions, very similar to Alder Festa's question around IRA funding and staff capacity. You mentioned that we're in this critical window where there's a large amount of federal funds that New Haven could apply for. I know you two are a very mighty team that are working incredibly hard. Just curious to hear about the challenges that you all have been running into and applying for grants, just just the capacity constraints that you all have in this window that we have to receive funds?
I think Max would agree that like there's just been opportunity after opportunity after opportunity, and it's not like you can take language one and just throw it into the next one. So I do think it's been kind of a lot to keep up with. I think OMB is hiring a grant writer, and I think that's very valuable. I know West Haven has a grant writer. Other communities have. Scrog has grant writers. So I think that'll be really valuable. But I think just the calendar of grant opportunities, it's a lot to try to keep up with. And we've done our best to put applications together for everything we think we're a strong fit for. And I think one thing we've learned is that like there's the city, but then there's all these affiliated authorities with the city, and so it can be challenging to like get buy-in from everyone on the city and authority side in time to pencil something out. But I feel like we've been lucky in that we've been able to have conversations with the parking authority or the housing authority and get their input or buy-in about developing proposals. Or the Board of Ed. But I think that's just like there's a lag with all of those things. Like if something has to go through the Board of Ed approval process, and then I think on the city side, we don't have any sort of exceptions in our procurement process for grants. So if you want to select a partner for a grant, you have to procure that partner, and that's also a lengthy process. So if you're applying for an EPA grant and you identify a nonprofit, they've kind of gone through the procurement process ahead of the grant, which is interesting because the EPA doesn't require that. The EPA allows you to say, hey, this is a nonprofit. If they're not profit motivated, you can partner with them. Or this is a university, they're also not profit motivated. You can partner with them. So I think that has been challenging in that, like, in order to meet the city requirement, you've got to go through a bunch of different hurdles in order just to apply for the grant. So I think, process-wise, that just, there's benefits to that, right? Because you've thought through the project in order to develop an RFP, and you've gone through a vetting process. But given the pace of these grants that have come, it can just be really, really challenging. So, like with the electric vehicle charging, we did put together RFPs, but it was such a short window, and there were all these different grant proposals being submitted all over the country that we didn't actually get any. We got one response. It wasn't super fleshed out, but that was a lot of time and energy that we weren't writing the body of the grant. We were writing these RFPs. So I think that that's another challenge just in terms of how these things, the different overlapping requirements fit together.
I have one more question, if I may. Just a question about I Heart My Home. I mean, it's been great to go door knocking with you, Max, to spread the word about I Heart My Home, and just a question about the individuals that we have in the city who are able to have the expertise to fulfill on the vocational skills, plumbers, electricians. Just what you're noticing in terms of the landscape of things with neighborhood housing services referring individuals to get these kinds of retrofits, and whether or not we have individuals in the city to be able to fulfill on that. Are there any challenges we have, any skills that we need to build, such that the individuals that are hired to do those retrofits are from New Haven? Just anything that you've seen in that landscape, anything that you can speak to?
Yeah, I think it's a big challenge. I think that like on heat pumps, there's this heat pump installer network, and we're now seeing some New Haven like HVAC or heating system companies on that list that there weren't any on the list a year ago. But they may be a New Haven-based business, but are they employing only New Haven residents? Or you have, it goes vice versa. I think, for a lot of this work, the state of Connecticut has very strict licensing requirements, much more strict than, say, New York. So if you want to, install a heat pump or lead the installation of heat pump, you have to have a series of HVAC licenses. Whereas in New York, you can be an HVAC tech at a much lower licensing threshold. So I think in terms of opening that opportunity, you've either got to change the licensing threshold or get a lot more students through technical school education so that they can get on track to be a plumber or electrician. There's different trade-offs there in terms of do you end up with somebody who's part of a trades union and has all these licenses, or are you lowering the barrier to entry for someone? I think with heat pumps, it's interesting in that you don't have to know how to put a shower together or do all this. You can focus just on that. I think that's why New York State has taken this technician approach. But I think it'd be great if we had a larger technical education system for our students to tap into, for students who decide they like to work with their hands, or they're interested in just starting work out of high school and don't want to go to college. I think that there's a lot of opportunities there, but it also requires a big investment in education.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions from committee members? So I just have one more. How do we compare to other municipalities regarding our electrification?
That's a good question. I don't know that we've actually done any deep research on that. I think some municipalities just have a literal wealth of resources. If you look at Westport was sort of famous because they got some Teslas a few years ago, turned them into police vehicles, and then they were able to publish these studies of we've saved tens of thousands of dollars on gasoline by purchasing these Teslas. Not every town's in a position to do that. Madison recently purchased last year purchased a Ford Mach-E, but even those, they're not cheap. So I think part of it is just has to do with the size of our vehicle fleet, the size of our physical plant for buildings versus some of these other towns and the amount of money that they're able to raise. But yeah, I don't know if there's good comparisons.
Well, Sustainable CT seems to think we're doing well.
Well, yeah, so we are Sustainable CT Gold certified. That's much broader than electrification. Yeah. I think we're really lucky in that, in talking with some other municipalities, they don't necessarily have an engineering department that's ready to take on this challenge. They have an engineering department that's maybe not convinced that a heat pump can heat and cool a building. Whereas we're very fortunate that we have an engineering department that not only understands the technology is mature and we can do this, but is excited about the challenge of it. I think we also have our city departments with electric vehicles that are willing to at least say, okay, we'll try an electric refuse truck. Or this morning I was walking back from lunch and saw a housing code inspector in a Chevy Bolt. They're going out into the neighborhood and doing work with LCI, and we haven't heard anyone from LCI saying give us our gas car back. I think people really like the Bolt. So yeah, I think there's been openness to expanding all of that.
Thank you. Thank you both for being here this evening. Appreciate all that wealth of information that you provided us with. And, at this point, I'm going to leave it to you for any comments or questions that you may have, or if we answered any of your questions, and then I'll open it up for public testimony. So if you have anything to add, Krishna, please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Director Winter and Max, for your updates and all of the work that you've been doing. It's extremely clear that you all are doing an immense amount of work toward these goals, and we really appreciate all of that. I think a question that I had that is similar to a question that Alder Smith had is about staff capacity, your own staff capacity. I know, apologies if this is not the right forum to bring this up in, but I know the proposed budget was just released, and none of the new positions that are proposed are climate policy related. And so that's just something that I think it's important for the Board of Alders to keep in mind when you're considering the budget, is ensuring that there's enough city staff capacity to continue making progress on these goals by applying for grants, understanding all of the bureaucratic red tape that goes along with that. I think even when working within the constraints of red tape, there are things that can be done to kind of make all that a bit easier. And one of those things could potentially be to have more people working on it. Obviously, I'm not in that team, so I'm not the expert, but I just wanted to mention that. And thank you all for the time and the forum to hear these updates. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for your communication. Well, again, thank you for, did you want to add to any of that?
Well, we are in the process of hiring a recycling educator. It's a part-time role. It doesn't.
She's hired.
I guess that's true.
Yeah, she's coming.
Yeah. Yeah, she should start next week. That's not directly related to electrification. Laura Kahn mentioned that that's actually funded with NIPS money. So it's sort of the other side of the NIPS fee. I think that's probably, if folks are excited about coming to the budget hearings, then maybe that's a better forum for it. But I do think some of the positions that are proposed do really overlap with climate in terms of, if we have folks working on Vision Zero, and that makes people feel like, hey, I can ride my bike to work, and improving the safety of our streets through infrastructure improvements and protected bike lanes. I think that you could say, hey, that's a climate position. Mm-hmm. And so I think there's 4 positions that are proposed for that type of work. I think there are other ways that we can harness some of the other activities of the city. There's a big proposal for housing inspectors in the mayor's budget. And there are some other communities like Burlington, Vermont, that have used their housing code inspection process as a vehicle for energy efficiency. They're like, hey, you are a landlord and you have a rental property. You've got to go through this life safety inspection, which additional inspectors can help make sure we're covering all the units that are required to do that. But then on top of that, we want you to get an energy audit. And hey, if you get an energy audit, they might cover most of the cost of doing insulation. So it's really not a big cost for you, but it's going to save your tenants a lot of money. And with the tenants don't have as big a light bill or as big of a gas bill, that can help everybody in the community. So I think there are these other programs that hopefully we can bring into the work that we're trying to do.
Well, great. Thank you again for being here this evening. And I'm sure we'll see you again soon.
Well,
we hope to see you again soon.
I'm glad Max could join me. It's been awesome.
Yes.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here, Max.
Thank you.
You're welcome anytime. At this time, I will open it up for public testimony, and we have Derek Faulkner that's on our list. Is Derek here? Hi, Derek. Come on up, have a seat, state your name and address for the record, and proceed with your testimony.
Good evening. Derek Faulkner, 166 Huntington Street. So just a couple comments. I'll be quick for the sake of time. So I'm here as a resident. I work at Southern Connecticut State University, and Laura took off before I could talk to her. But yeah, I don't know what's going on with the SSI situation there. I'll ask again. But yeah, so at Southern, I have seen successful implementation of various projects, fuel cells, solar, EV charger. I'm really excited about it. I'm really happy about it. And I'm really glad to hear that update from Steve. I'm excited about what's going on in the city. I'm really grateful to see these changes happening. And I just wanted to come here to stress the need for continued action, further action to keep this momentum up, because we're relying on leadership, the city leadership, to help facilitate these changes and to meet those goals. So as a renter, there's a lot of renters here in New Haven. Can feel kind of powerless sometimes. You know, I can't make use of certain incentives like a homeowner can, but I'm counting on and trusting our leadership to make these changes in the city. I'm not the only one that's worried about air quality out there. There's a ton of problems associated with fossil fuels. People are worried about them. Not everyone's well informed, and we want help. We need the city to facilitate these changes. And I just wanted to come state that. And thank you all for letting me come here. And thank you, Steve and Max, for your update as well. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks for being here, and thank you for your patience.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anyone else from the public that would like to speak on this topic? Please come forward. Is there anyone from the public that would like to speak on this topic? Please step up. And for a third time, is there anyone from the public that would like to speak on this topic? Okay, seeing none, do I hear a motion to close the public portion?
Madam Chair, I make a motion to close the public portion.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. All in favor of closing the public portion, say aye.
Aye.
Nays? Abstentions? The ayes have it.
Madam Chair,
Yes, go ahead.
I'd like to move item number 2.
Second.
Item 2 has been moved and seconded. Any discussion on item number 2, which is what we just discussed?
Madam Chair, there was a lot of information and a great update from Director Winter and our guest. So we did hear these and digest it. So I make a motion to read them.
We will finish the discussions and then we could, well, the motion has been made and seconded. Was that your discussion?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. And we'll vote as soon as, folks that would like to speak have a chance to speak on this. Alder Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That was a great conversation. I really appreciate just the space to learn so much about kind of where the city is at, which can be just such a great framework for us to think about the rest of the year and some of our priorities. 3 things really stood out to me. One was really jobs, tracking, and funding were some of the themes. So one, the opportunity that we have in the city to build more green jobs, to think about we have a gap around plumbers and electricians and individuals who have this expertise. And we have a lot of individuals who are excited to build skills to be able to lead the city into our future. So I'm really excited for us as we move forward to think about that technical capacity building piece. Second is tracking. I think something that I'm just reflecting on aloud that I'd love to have further conversation about is, that 1 to 2% or that 2% of electric vehicles, getting that sense of the square footage that we have that are currently electric, and just keeping track of that as we move forward. Maybe there's a visualization tool, like a visual dashboard that we can build as a city, but just something I'm thinking about is how do we continue to get a sense of where we're at and how does that inform the sort of policies or different challenges that we help to mitigate in the future. And then third is this last piece around funding, and that it just feels like we're in this window period where there's an influx of funding. And I'm not sure if I have a ton of solutions in my head, and something that I think about is, pulling from some of the time and capacity of young people or college students. We could think about our design fellowship programs. I think this would be a conversation with the department to think about their needs, but I am curious about the staffing capacity piece and creative solutions that could also similarly match, energy that we have in the city to provide capacity, and the need that we have to be able to apply for this critical funding. So I'm curious about creative solutions that we can think of there. But those are the three reflections: jobs, tracking, and funding, and excited to continue the conversation in the future.
Thank you. Alder Flores.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to say thank you to the Electric Future Committee from New Haven Climate Movement, also Director Winter and the Office of Climate and Sustainability for the presentations done today. Some colleagues might know that I was actually one of the co-founders of the New Haven Climate Movement Youth Action Team, and it's just really great to see that something that was around that was started with in terms of like the youth portion of New Haven Climate Movement in high school has continued in doing so much work and also branching out in several committees and really getting involved. And I think that it's a really great image to see in terms of youth, people in the city, residents really collaborating with city folks and getting these things done. And I think that the collaboration that we've seen with the Office of Climate and Sustainability, the engineering department, and residents and students, especially in the New Haven public school system, has been really great to see. So I just wanted to add that I'm very thankful that there are still youth working on this and continuously pushing on it. And I think this was a really great workshop in order to, like Alder Smith said, like really set priorities and kind of see what the agenda might look like in these coming months. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Alder Flores. I'll just add, I think we are very fortunate to have a department. We're fortunate to have someone as knowledgeable as Director Winter as well. I couldn't think of a better person in this position. And we're lucky that he actually has applied for so many grants, as we witnessed since he took tenure in that position, and hiring Max on. So we're heading in the right direction. Do we wish we could move faster? Absolutely. Time is of essence, right? And we, I believe, are an example, the city of New Haven anyway, to other municipalities. Yes, the 2%, 1 to 2% sounds so minimal, but that was done in a very short period of time as well. So we have to look at what time period did it take to get there and what challenges were faced during that process. And we learn from those challenges and we try to speed up, but our job too is to push the state and for us to push the state, to push the federal government to maintain these programs for residents, to maintain these programs as a whole, not just one bubble, but to continue. And then through that, we're an example to other countries as well. That's a problem. Also is convincing some countries that they too are responsible. But obviously things start on a scale, and we are that scale. And we could work as a committee also to guide our I want to say Alder Winter, Director Winter. Alder Winter, Director Winter wasn't Alder. So we need to also be able to sit down and have these conversations to see what else we can do as a committee to assist in any capacity. So, I'll end with that. Any other discussion? Okay. Seeing none, all in favor, and before I actually take the vote, this is a continuing conversation. Just because we're going to read and file this particular item, this is a conversation that will continue in various capacities. So just because we're reading and filing this doesn't mean that the conversation ends here. So with that, all in favor of reading and filing this item, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Abstentions? The ayes have it. We will read and file this item.
Madam Chair, make a motion
Two?
to adjourn this meeting.
Second, wait. Misty has her hand up.
Item 1.
Oh, do we need to read and file item 1? Oh, okay, I thought it was just,
Not the workshop, but item 1 needs to be written.
okay. Thank you.
Madam Chair, I move item number 1.
Second. Item has been moved and seconded. Any discussion on item 1?
Madam Chair, Ms. Kim. Ms. Kim gave us a lot of information and thoughts, a lot of update on the pesticide regarding lawn care, et cetera, et cetera. And again, it's a workshop and it's a conversation we need to continue. So with that, I'm recommending to read and file.
Thank you. Any further discussion on item 1? No? Once again, we were giving a plethora of information regarding pesticides, artificial fields, and I think we need to digest this information and also possibly, act on some of the suggestions that were made by Ms. Khan. And, again, these are conversations that will continue. These are conversations that are necessary, and these are conversations that we as a committee can work on some suggestions. With that, we will take a vote. All in favor of reading and filing item 1, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays, abstentions? The ayes have it.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn this meeting.
Second. Motion to adjourn has been made and seconded. Any discussion on adjournment? Seeing none, all in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? The ayes have it. We are adjourned.
Yeah.
Good evening.